When I gave birth in 1970, we had no inkling. There was nothing in our imagination. We had no projection that we could write a birth plan. We all knew, and our mothers and grandmothers had told us, that there's no way to know what your birth's going to be like. Therefore, there's really nothing you can do to prepare for it. And that's the childbirth concept, number one. And it's global, and it exists today, even though now women are writing birth plans. Why didn't we in the United States write a birth plan in 1970 when I gave birth? We lacked choices. We didn't have any choices. However, if you push me now, in retrospect, I would have said that the birth plan we wrote back in the 1970s would be about the skills we were using. For the first generation post-World War II in the United States, finally, we had skills associated to giving birth that had never existed around the globe throughout time and place. 3 obstetricians, Grantley Dick Reed, who wrote Childbirth Without Fear, Lamaze, and Bradley, developed skills. Yes, they were targeted to low-risk women. Yes, they were targeted to outcome, a natural birth, without pain, and without medical care. Yet in the United States, multiple millions of my generation of families happily went to classes for 6 weeks, and we happily practiced breathing and relaxation skills, and we happily used those skills together when we went to the hospital primarily, had all the assessments, monitoring procedures that were being done at that time. And what we found was that our birth plan, had we written one back then, the goal would have been for us to cope, manage, deal with, handle, work through, stay on top of, and feel in control as birth unfolded. Because back then there was a 5% cesarean rate because the surgery was so dangerous. It was only used to save a woman's life. So we all labored, whether we had a good birth or a tragedy, whether we had a short birth or lingered for days and days, whether we did cope well with or without skills, or whether we felt out of control from the moment it started. We had no control over our birth, and therefore we didn't write a birth plan. However, birth plans became popular in the 1980s. But what happened was that planning your birth based on choices you should exercise and care providers should regard actually did away with skills. In other words, we had this moment of opportunity when skills, Lamaze, Bradley, Grantley, Dick Reed, and the skills hundreds of mothers and fathers were developing that have become known as birthing better, all of that was lost, was thrown away, and it was intentional. It was intentional because there began to be a belief that sprang from the natural birth movement and famous authors that childbirth was a normal, natural, physiological event, which is true, but the assumption that went with it was that therefore women knew how to do it, because we could all see cats and dogs and horses and cows just get on with it. So if we just got on with it, that meant that we actually knew how to do it, rather than it happened to us. And so the decision was, through natural birth advocates, was that we knew the kind of birth we wanted, and if we articulated it and wrote it down as a plan, that our care providers would endeavor to give us the birth that we wanted. Fathers who had been birth coaches under Bradley, which was husband or father coach childbirth, or under Lamaze, were now told, no, don't try to help her, just support her choices. And so everything became very, very confusing at the end of the 70s and early 80s. Classes that had been based on Lamaze, particularly in the hospitals, now became information or education classes. In other words, we moved from childbirth preparation to childbirth information or childbirth education. So we are now where we are. Birthing Better continued to develop through the decades. And families asked me to carry forward 2 things. All of the skills, for sure, but they also asked that I carry on the concept that they developed, which was simple, repeatable. 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth. And that is accurate. It's true. Not 99%, not 57%. 100% of pregnant women will give birth. Now, I know you can be sitting there thinking, but what if a woman has a termination? She's still giving birth, and she knows that. It's hard to make that decision. What about a miscarriage? Well, if she knew she was pregnant, she knows she's giving birth. What about a cesarean? We're still doing the activity of birthing our baby. We have to get to the hospital. We're prepped. We lie on a table while surgery is being done. We're still doing that activity. So in our belief system is birthing better families, and what we want to pass on to you is 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth. It's always an activity that each woman is doing with her baby, no matter whether she's actually alone or in a room of hundreds of people. Nobody does the activity except each of us as a pregnant woman birthing our baby. And each woman whose birth unfolds, we know that we could not determine how it was going to unfold. In other words, that first childbirth concept, you never know what your birth is going to be like, remains true today, birth plan or not. How many women find that their birth plan is fulfilled the way that they wanted? Well, in reality, very, very few. Because in reality, very, very few women are privileged enough to be in a country where they have choices around maternity care. But also the question is what are women planning? Well, we can, in a larger picture, go, I'm going to plan whether to birth in a hospital, a birth center at home. I'm going to plan whether to have a general practitioner, an obstetrician, or a midwife with me. But then what women did when birth plans became available and advocated, they talked about what music they wanted, what they wanted to eat, how they wanted their lights, who they wanted to be at the birth, how they wanted to be approached, what assessments, monitoring procedures they wanted and didn't want. And while so few women are privileged to have the opportunity to create a birth plan, the other thing that we discovered is few women's birth plan unfolds the way that they want it. And that brings up a dilemma. Should we ignore birth plans or discard them? No, from Birthing Better viewpoint, if you have the ability to create a birth plan, that's exceptional. Take advantage of it. However, we do believe that 100% of pregnant women who are going to give birth should all self-learn and then use some level of birth skills. Because if we were going to plan what birth skills would do for us, it wouldn't be to avoid or have more medical care or less medical care, or to have a pain-free birth, or where we birthed or who we birthed with. It would be how we managed, how we cope. That would be our birth plan. I want to cope well. I want to manage well. I want to stay on top of, feeling control, work through, and handle what happens to and around me and what sensations I feel at the time. So we want you to create 2 birth plans. One, give to your care provider. The other birth plan, copy and give one to your birth provider, and the other one you keep. And that second birth plan is full of the skills that you've learned so that you can refer back to them if you need to. Often we hear people say, well, I've learned some skills, but I don't know when to use them. The reality is they become really, really apparent right away, because it's apparent that some of the skills you'll probably learn are breathing skills and relaxation skills. Birthing Better skills are infinitely broader and have greater depth. So we talk about how you communicate with your own mind and get on with it, how you communicate with others, verbally and non-verbally, how you, if you're laboring, how do you maintain a progressive labor so it doesn't stall? How do you prepare your body to open up and let this big object come down through and out your body? So sure, make birth plans, but understand when it's all over, the chances are that you will remember how you behaved and what you did, compared to what you got and what you received. Please watch the video on birth stories and how important they are. And what you'll discover is that the common 3 elements of birth stories included a 4th element during that unique period of time when there was a skills-based approach to childbirth. And what we want to do is bring back that 4th element, because in reality, when birth starts and ends, or how long it goes, or what they did and didn't do to me, good or bad, and what we felt as sensations, are just what's happening. But when we add the 4th element of being skilled, then we're talking about what we did and how we felt about what we did. Birth skill use doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to have some birth skills so that you can effectively work through the activity of birthing your baby. And it is vitally important that your significant other or others share those birth skills with you so that they can effectively help you stay in control. It's as simple as that.